Victor Chen sat at the grand piano, his fingers dancing across the ivory keys as the final notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 filled the concert hall. The audience held their breath until the last note faded into silence. Then, as if released from a spell, they erupted into thunderous applause. Victor stood and bowed deeply, his face showing the practiced smile he had perfected over years of performances. This was his 5th international competition win this year. At 32, Victor was at the height of his career, celebrated, admired, and increasingly, bored. Later that evening, at the reception in one of Tokyo's most exclusive hotels, Victor sipped champagne and nodded politely as wealthy patrons and fellow musicians showered him with praise. The words washed over him, familiar and hollow. Brilliant technique, they said. Flawless execution. Nobody mentioned feeling or emotion because that wasn't what Victor was known for. He was known for perfection. Have you heard her play yet? Victor overheard a conversation between 2 music critics standing nearby. At that little place in Shinjuku? Yes, last week. Quite unlike anything I've experienced. Victor's ears perked up. In a world where he had heard everything and everyone worth hearing, unlike anything caught his attention. Who are you talking about? Victor asked, inserting himself into their conversation with the ease of someone accustomed to being welcomed anywhere. The critics exchanged glances. Hana Takahashi, the older one said. She plays at Blue Note Tokyo on Thursday nights. Classical training, but she's developed something entirely her own. Better than me? Victor asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The critics laughed uncomfortably. Different, the younger one replied diplomatically. You should hear her yourself. That night in his hotel room, Victor searched for information about Hana Takahashi. There wasn't much. No recordings on major platforms, no website, just a few mentions on the Blue Notes schedule, and some scattered comments on obscure music forums. Most strikingly, a reviewer had written, Takahashi doesn't play the piano. She speaks through it, Victor scoffed. Such flowery language was typical of those who didn't understand the technical mastery required to truly excel. Still, curiosity nagged at him. It had been years since he'd heard anyone play who surprised him. Thursday night found Victor in a corner of the Blue Note, a dimly lit jazz club that felt worlds away from the concert halls he normally inhabited. The space was intimate, with perhaps 50 people sipping drinks at small tables. The stage held only a piano, not even a particularly impressive one, Victor noted critically. At 9 o'clock precisely, a woman walked onto the stage. She was small in stature, probably in her late 30s, dressed simply in black pants and a blue blouse. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and she wore no jewelry except small pearl earrings. She bowed briefly to the audience, then sat at the piano. Victor leaned forward, ready to analyze and critique. He expected jazz or perhaps some watered-down classical pieces rearranged to please a casual audience. What he didn't expect was the silence that fell over the room as soon as Hana played her first note. She began with something that sounded like Debussy, but then shifted into a melody Victor didn't recognize. Her technique was solid, very good though not as perfect as his own, but there was something in the way she played that made technical comparison seem beside the point. Each note felt like a word in a story, each phrase a complete thought. Victor found himself forgetting to analyze and simply listening. When she finished her first piece, the audience remained silent for several seconds before applauding. It wasn't the wild enthusiasm Victor received at his concerts. It was something deeper, more reverent. She played for an hour, a mix of classical pieces and what must have been her own compositions. Victor remained transfixed, alternating between professional appreciation and an unsettling feeling that he was hearing something his own playing lacked. After the performance, Victor watched as Hana chatted with audience members. There was no pretense about her, no carefully constructed artist persona. She laughed easily and thanked people sincerely for coming. "You're not drinking your whiskey," observed the bartender, breaking Victor's concentration. "I got distracted," Victor admitted, then finished his drink in one swallow. "Does she play here every Thursday?" "For the past 2 years," the bartender nodded. "Best nights of the week, something sparked in Victor, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Competitiveness, challenge. He had spent so long being the undisputed best that he'd forgotten the thrill of having something to prove. He approached Hana as the crowd around her thinned, Up close, he noticed the fine lines around her eyes and a peacefulness in her expression that made her seem both older and younger than her years. "Ms. Takahashi," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Victor Chen." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "The competition winner. I read about your performance last week." Her English was excellent with just a slight accent. "Did you enjoy the show?" "Very much," Victor said. "Your style is interesting." "Thank you," she replied, seeming genuinely pleased by his measured compliment. "I'm performing at a charity event next Saturday at Suntory Hall," Victor continued. "It was meant to be just me, but I had an idea while watching you play." Hana tilted her head slightly, waiting. "What would you think about a piano duel?" The words came out before Victor had fully formed the thought. Two pianos on stage taking turns showing different approaches to the same pieces. It could be quite educational for the audience. "A duel?" Hana repeated, looking puzzled. "Like a competition?" "A friendly one," Victor clarified. "For charity. It would certainly sell tickets." The club owner, who had been listening nearby, stepped forward excitedly. "What an honor that would be. Victor Chen and our Hana on the same stage." Victor watched Hana's face. She seemed neither eager nor intimidated, merely thoughtful. "The event benefits music education programs," Victor added, sensing her hesitation. "Getting more instruments into schools." Something softened in her expression. "That's a worthy cause. So you'll do it?" Victor pressed. Hana looked at him directly, and for a moment, Victor felt strangely exposed, as though she could see past his confident exterior to the restlessness beneath. "Yes," she said finally. "But not as a duel. Music shouldn't be about winning." Victor smiled, though her words irked him. "Call it what you like. Two different pianists, two different styles. The audience can decide for themselves which they prefer." News of the upcoming event spread quickly through Tokyo's music circles. Victor's manager was initially concerned about sharing the spotlight, but became enthusiastic when ticket sales doubled. The press loved the story. The internationally acclaimed virtuoso and the local hidden gem, facing off on twin grand pianos. In interviews, Victor was careful to speak respectfully of Hana, while subtly emphasizing his own credentials. "I'm always looking to expand musical horizons," he told a reporter. "Ms. Takahashi has an emotional quality to her playing that many will find appealing. I think the contrast with my technical approach will make for an interesting evening." What Victor didn't say was that he intended to crush her. Not cruelly, he wasn't a villain, but decisively. He would remind everyone that while emotion had its place, true mastery required the kind of dedication and precision that had made him famous. He would play pieces so technically demanding that she couldn't possibly match them. It wasn't until a week before the event, during a rehearsal at Suntory Hall, that doubt began to creep in. Hana arrived promptly, greeted the staff warmly, and approached her practice with a calm focus that Victor found irritatingly admirable. "I thought we might each play a piece, then respond to each other's interpretation," Victor suggested. "I'll start with Liszt's La Campanella." Hana nodded. "A good showcase for your skills." Victor played a portion of the notoriously difficult piece, his fingers a blur over the keys. When he finished, he turned to Hana with a smile that didn't quite hide his challenge. "Your turn." Instead of attempting the same piece, Hana played a simple Japanese folk melody, transformed through subtle harmonies into something hauntingly beautiful. When she finished, she looked at Victor with a gentle expression that somehow made him feel like he was the one being tested. "That's not the same piece," he pointed out. "No," she agreed. "It's a response. Isn't that what conversation is? Not repeating but answering." Victor frowned. This wasn't how he had imagined their duel. He had expected her to try to match him note for note, technique for technique. A contest he was sure to win. Instead, she was changing the rules, turning his competition into something else entirely. As they continued rehearsing, Victor felt increasingly unsettled. Not because Hana played better than him technically. She didn't, but because when she played, everyone in the hall, from the sound engineers to the janitorial staff, stopped to listen in a way they never did for him. The night before the event, Victor lay awake in his hotel room, replaying Hana's music in his head. For the first time in years, he felt something he'd nearly forgotten: nervousness. Not fear of making mistakes. Victor Chen didn't make mistakes, but fear of something worse. being perfect yet somehow missing the point entirely. The morning of the charity event, Victor woke early. He went through his usual pre-performance routine, 20 minutes of finger exercises, a light breakfast, and a brisk walk to clear his head. But today nothing seemed to calm the unusual flutter of nerves in his stomach. He found himself thinking about Hana Takahashi. What little he knew about her didn't fit the profile of any pianist he'd encountered before. During their brief rehearsals, she had been polite but reserved, offering little about herself beyond what was necessary for their performance preparations. Victor called his assistant. "Find out what you can about Hana Takahashi's background," he said. "Where she studied, her performance history, anything useful." 2 hours later, over coffee at a quiet cafe near his hotel, Victor received a thin file of information. Hana had studied at Juilliard for 3 years before suddenly withdrawing. There were newspaper clippings of promising early performances, a few competition wins in her late teens, then nothing for several years until she resurfaced in Tokyo's jazz scene. "This can't be everything," Victor said, flipping through the sparse pages. "She's deliberately kept a low profile," his assistant explained. According to one source, she was once considered a rising star in classical piano, but something happened about 8 years ago that made her step away completely. Victor frowned. "What happened?" "Nobody would say. But I found this." His assistant passed him a printout of an old concert program. Hana's name was listed as the featured soloist for the Tokyo Philharmonic, but a handwritten note indicated performance canceled. Victor's phone buzzed with a message from the event coordinator. The hall needed both pianists for a final sound check at 3 o'clock. He put the file aside, deciding he would learn more from meeting with Hana directly. Suntory Hall looked different in the daytime, less imposing without the evening lights, but still elegant. When Victor arrived, Hana was already seated at one of the 2 grand pianos on stage, playing a gentle melody he didn't recognize. "That's beautiful," he said, approaching her. "One of yours?" Hana's hand stilled. "Yes, something I've been working on." "Does it have a name?" She hesitated. "I call it Small Shoes." An odd title, Victor thought. "I was hoping we could talk about the format for tonight," he said, sitting on the bench of the other piano. "I've been thinking about our approach." "I thought we had decided," Hana replied. "You play," I respond. "I play," you respond. "Yes, but I was thinking we should add some structure. Perhaps start with Bach, move to the Romantics, then finish with something contemporary. Show the full range." Hana considered this, then nodded. "That's fine." Victor studied her calm face. "Why did you agree to this?" he asked suddenly. "You don't seem like someone who enjoys the spotlight." A small smile crossed her lips. "The cause is good. Music education matters to me. You taught?" "Yes." She didn't elaborate. Victor decided to be direct. "You were at Juilliard. You were headed for a major career. What happened?" The question hung in the air. For a moment, Victor thought she might not answer. Then Hana sighed softly. "Life happened," she said simply. "Sometimes our paths change direction. But to walk away from that level of training, that potential for what?" Hana asked, looking at him directly. "Fame, competitions? Is that why you play, Victor?" The question caught him off guard. "I play because I'm exceptional at it," he said. It was not arrogance, but simple fact. That's not a why. That's a how. Victor felt a flash of irritation. "I play to show what's possible when you dedicate yourself completely to mastering something. I play because perfection should be witnessed." The words sounded hollow even as he said them. Hana nodded, not challenging him further. She turned back to her piano and began to play again. This time a familiar Bach prelude, but with subtle differences in tempo and emphasis that made it sound almost like a lullaby. "That's not how Bach intended it to be played," Victor couldn't help saying. "Perhaps not," Hana agreed, continuing to play. "But it's how I needed to play it today." A stagehand approached, letting them know they would begin the sound check in 5 minutes. Hana stood from the piano. "Will you join me for tea after this?" she asked unexpectedly. "There's a small place nearby I think you might enjoy." Victor was surprised but nodded. "Sure." The sound check went smoothly. Both pianos were perfectly tuned, the acoustics of the hall superb. Victor ran through sections of the pieces he had selected, each one chosen to showcase his technical brilliance. Watching Hana test her own selections, he noted that while her technique was excellent, she wasn't choosing particularly difficult pieces. You're going with Debussy for the middle section? He asked, recognizing one of her choices. Yes. Claire de Lune, she confirmed. It's a bit simple, isn't it? For someone of your ability. Hannah closed the piano lid gently. Some things are worth playing not because they're difficult, but because they're beautiful. After the sound check, they walked together to a traditional tea house hidden on a quiet side street. Inside, the space was serene. Dark wood, soft light, the gentle sound of water from a small indoor fountain. They were led to a private booth where they sat on cushions around a low table. I come here to think, Hannah said as a server brought them green tea in simple ceramic cups. It reminds me to slow down. Victor took a sip of the tea. It was more bitter than he expected, but there was a lingering sweetness afterward. Like Hannah's music, he thought. How do you define success, Victor? Hannah asked once they were alone. Victor considered the question. Recognition, mastery, being the best at what I do. And are you? The best? Yes, he said without hesitation. By any objective measure, Hannah nodded. I believed that once too. That success meant being recognized, being the best technically. What do you believe now? She looked into her tea for a moment before answering. That success is connection. That music exists not to show skill but to share feeling. Feelings are subjective, Victor countered. Technical excellence is measurable. Is that why you challenged me? To measure? Victor hadn't expected such directness. I was curious, he admitted. I heard you play and couldn't understand why someone would choose to perform in a small club when they clearly had the ability for bigger stages. And now? I still don't understand, he said honestly. Hannah smiled slightly. Maybe after tonight you will. As the afternoon light began to fade, they made their way back toward the concert hall. The streets were getting busier as people finished work, and they walked close together to navigate the crowds. There was an article about you, Hannah said suddenly, after you won the International Chopin competition last year. It called you the machine because of your technical perfection. Victor nodded. I remember. Was it meant as a compliment? Of course, Victor said, though something about the nickname had always bothered him. I don't think machines can make people cry, Hannah said. Or laugh. Or remember. They stopped at a crosswalk waiting for the light to change. A street performer was playing violin nearby, a simple folk tune that had drawn a small crowd. Look at their faces, Hannah said, nodding toward the audience. That connection, that's what music is for. Victor watched as people dropped coins into the violinist's case. The man wasn't particularly skilled. His intonation was sometimes off. His bowing occasionally scratchy, but there was an undeniable joy in his playing that the crowd responded to. Technical skill without heart is like a beautiful empty house, Hannah continued. Impressive to look at, but who wants to live there? The light changed and they crossed the street. Victor remained quiet, turning her words over in his mind. When they reached the back entrance of the concert hall, they found it buzzing with activity. The event organizer rushed over to them. There you are. We've sold out completely, even standing room. Word got out about your piano duel and everyone wants to see it. Victor felt the familiar pre-performance focus settling over him. I should get ready, he said to Hannah. Thank you for the tea. Hannah bowed slightly. Thank you for the conversation. In his dressing room, Victor changed into his concert attire, a perfectly tailored black suit, and began his final preparation ritual. He stretched his fingers, reviewed his program, and closed his eyes to visualize each piece. But instead of seeing sheet music in his mind, he found himself thinking about what Hannah had said. Success is connection. Music exists to share feeling. Had he ever made someone feel something with his playing? Beyond admiration for his skill, there was a knock on his door. 15 minutes, Mr. Chen. Victor opened his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt uncertain about what would happen when he sat down at the piano tonight. Not because he doubted his ability to play perfectly, that was never in question, but because he was beginning to wonder if perfect playing was really the point after all. Suntory Hall hummed with anticipation. Every seat was filled from the front row to the highest balcony. Victor peeked through the curtain at the gathering crowd. Music critics, wealthy patrons, fellow musicians, and many faces he didn't recognize. Word had spread beyond the usual classical music circles. Quite a turnout, said a voice behind him. It was Thomas Wong, his longtime manager, looking pleased. "Everyone loves a showdown," Victor replied, letting the curtain fall back into place. "This was brilliant, actually," Thomas said, "bringing in someone unknown, creating this contrast. The press is eating it up. The master versus the mystery pianist. We should consider doing more events like this." Victor frowned. "It's not a gimmick. She's genuinely good." Thomas raised his eyebrows. "High praise coming from you. Should I be worried?" He laughed, making it clear he wasn't serious. "Just make sure they've adjusted the lighting like I asked," Victor said. "Equal spotlight on both pianos." Thomas nodded and walked away, already talking into his phone. Victor turned and headed back toward his dressing room, but paused when he noticed Hannah's door was slightly ajar. Through the crack, he could see her sitting quietly, eyes closed, hands resting palm up on her knees. She wasn't reviewing music or practicing finger exercises. She was simply being. A young woman approached Hannah's door with a bouquet of flowers. Something about her seemed familiar to Victor, perhaps a student from one of the local music schools. The woman knocked gently. "Come in, Yuki," Hannah called. The young woman entered, and Victor heard her say, "These are from everyone at the community center. We're all here tonight." Victor continued to his own dressing room, feeling like he had glimpsed something private. He sat at his dressing table and stared at his reflection. His face looked the same as always before a performance, composed, focused, ready. But something felt different inside. There was a knock at his door. "10 minutes, Mr. Chen." Victor straightened his tie and stood up. As he walked toward the stage, he passed a group of stagehands huddled around a small TV in the wings. They were watching what looked like a news report. "Terrible timing," one of them whispered. 8 years to the day." Victor slowed his steps, catching a glimpse of the TV screen. It showed the aftermath of some kind of accident, emergency vehicles, a gathered crowd. He couldn't make out the details before moving past. The event coordinator intercepted him before he could reach the stage. "Mr. Chen, we're ready for you and Ms. Takahashi. The director of the music education program will introduce you both, then you'll take your positions at the pianos." Victor nodded. "Where is Ms. Takahashi?" she asked for a moment alone. "She'll join us shortly." The coordinator continued explaining the order of events, but Victor found his attention wandering. Something was nagging at him. The date, the news report, the flowers from the community center. 8 years to the day. There was a connection he was missing. "Mr. Chen, is that acceptable?" The coordinator was looking at him expectantly. "Yes, fine," Victor said, though he hadn't been listening. Just then Hannah appeared, walking toward them in a simple black dress. Her face was composed, but Victor thought her eyes seemed different, deeper somehow, carrying something heavy. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly as they stood together waiting to be introduced. She looked at him, slightly surprised by the question. "Yes, thank you for asking." The program director stepped onto the stage and the audience fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for supporting the Children's Music Education Initiative tonight. We are honored to present 2 remarkable pianists who have graciously donated their time and talent." As the introduction continued, Victor leaned closer to Hannah. "I overheard something about today's date being significant." 8 years? Hannah's breath caught slightly. She didn't look at him when she answered. "Yes, something happened? Something to do with why you left classical music?" Before she could answer, applause erupted from the audience. "Their cue to walk on stage. It doesn't matter now," Hannah said. "Let's play." They walked out together, bowing to the enthusiastic audience. 2 magnificent grand pianos faced each other at the center of the stage, their lids raised like black wings. Victor sat at the piano on the left, Hannah at the one on the right. As planned, he would begin the program. He placed his hands on the keys, took a deep breath, and launched into La Campanella by Liszt, a piece famous for its technical difficulty. His fingers flew across the keys with precision and speed, drawing gasps from the audience at particularly intricate passages. Victor was in his element, showcasing the virtuosity that had made him famous. Every note was perfect, every phrase executed exactly as intended. When he finished, the audience erupted in applause and cheers. He turned to Hannah, the challenge clear. "Your move." Hannah nodded in acknowledgement. Instead of trying to match his technical display, she began to play Bach's Prelude in C major, one of the simplest pieces in the classical repertoire, something a skilled beginner might learn. Victor was confused. Why choose something so elementary? Was she conceding defeat already? But as Hannah continued, Victor realized she was transforming the piece. The simple arpeggios became a canvas for subtle variations in touch and timing. She played with such tenderness that the familiar notes seemed to carry new meaning, like simple words rearranged into poetry. When she finished, the applause was different from what Victor had received, not as thunderous but somehow deeper, filled with sighs and murmurs of appreciation. They continued their musical conversation. Victor played Beethoven's Appassionata with dramatic intensity and technical brilliance. Hannah responded with Debussy's Clair de Lune, finding depths of expression in its relatively simple structure that Victor had never considered. With each exchange, a pattern emerged. Victor chose pieces that showcased difficulty and virtuosity. Hannah chose pieces that spoke directly to the heart, playing them with a vulnerability that made them feel new. During Hannah's performance of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Victor noticed an older Japanese couple in the front row holding hands, tears streaming down their faces. He found himself watching the audience more than Hannah's hands, seeing how they responded to her playing with closed eyes. Gentle smiles, quiet tears. When it was Victor's turn again, he sat motionless for a moment. The piece he had planned next was Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit, arguably one of the most technically challenging pieces in the piano repertoire. He had performed it flawlessly dozens of times, but suddenly he didn't want to play it, not after seeing how Hannah's music moved people. Instead, he began to play Chopin's Nocturne in C minor, a piece he hadn't performed in years. It was the first piece his mother had truly loved when he played it as a child, before competitions and critics and world tours. He had forgotten that memory until now. As he played, Victor let go of his usual precise control. He allowed himself to remember his mother's face, the way she would close her eyes and sway slightly when he played this piece. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about technique or audience impressions. He was simply sharing a memory through music. When he finished, there was a moment of complete silence before the applause began, gentle at first, then building. Victor looked up and saw Hannah watching him with a small, knowing smile. They continued their exchange, but something had shifted. Victor found himself choosing pieces not for their difficulty, but for their meaning to him. With each piece, he felt like he was remembering something long forgotten, why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. During a brief intermission, they met backstage for a moment. "Something changed," Hannah said quietly. Victor nodded. "I remembered that I used to play differently. Before the competitions. Before I became the machine." Hannah's eyes softened. "It's never too late to remember." As they prepared to return to the stage, one of the organizers approached Hannah. "There's a call for you," he said, looking uncomfortable. "They say it's urgent. Something about the memorial." Hannah's face paled slightly. "Tell them I'll call back after the performance." "Memorial?" Victor asked as the organizer walked away. Hannah was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "My daughter. Today is the anniversary of her death. 8 years ago." The words hit Victor like a physical blow. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "Her name was Aiko," Hannah continued, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "She was 6. There was an accident while I was on tour in Europe." "A school bus, Ma. We don't have to continue the performance," Victor said immediately. "We can tell them—" "No," Hannah interrupted. "Playing tonight, it helps. Music is how I still speak to her." She looked at him directly. "That's why I play the way I do now. Every note is a conversation with her." The stage manager signaled that it was time to return. Hannah straightened her shoulders. "Ready?" she asked. Victor nodded, though he felt shaken. Everything made sense now. Her departure from the classical world, the canceled performance 8 years ago, the piece she'd been composing called Small Shoes. As they walked back onto the stage, Victor realized something with sudden clarity. He had never once played for someone else. Not really. Every performance had been about him, his skill, his reputation, his success. For the first time in his career, Victor Chen wondered what it would feel like to play not for himself, but as a gift to someone else. When Victor and Hannah returned to the stage after the intermission, the audience welcomed them with warm applause. But Victor barely heard it. His mind was still processing what Hannah had shared with him. Her daughter. the accident. 8 years of carrying that grief, transforming it into music that connected with others. He sat at his piano watching as Hannah took her place across from him. Under the stage lights, she looked both fragile and strong, a paradox he was only beginning to understand. According to their program, it was Hannah's turn to begin the second half. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and began to play. Victor didn't recognize the piece at first. It wasn't from the standard classical repertoire. The melody was simple, almost like a children's song, but layered with harmonies that gave it unexpected depth. As she continued, the piece evolved, sometimes playful, sometimes wistful, building to moments of such raw emotion that Victor felt his throat tighten. He realized this must be her own composition, perhaps the one she had called Small Shoes. Watching her play, Victor understood that this was no abstract artistic expression. This was a mother speaking to her child across an impossible divide. This was love made audible. When Hannah finished, there wasn't immediate applause. Instead, a profound silence held the hall, the kind of silence that comes when people are too moved to react. Then slowly the audience began to applaud, many wiping tears from their eyes. Victor looked down at his hands resting on the keys. It was his turn now. The piece he had planned was Prokofiev's Toccata, another technical showcase. But after what he had just witnessed, it felt completely wrong. Instead, he began to play Schumann's Kinderscenen, scenes from childhood, specifically Träumerei, dreaming. He hadn't prepared it, hadn't played it in years, but his fingers remembered. Unlike his usual performances where he planned every nuance, Victor simply let himself feel the music. He thought about Hannah's daughter, about childhood, about loss, about the purity of playing simply because the music moved you. His performance wasn't technically perfect. There were small hesitations, tiny variations in tempo that he would normally never allow, but there was something else there, something true. When he finished, he didn't look at the audience. He looked at Hannah. A single tear had tracked down her cheek, but she was smiling at him, a smile of recognition, of gratitude. They continued their exchange, but the dynamic had completely changed. This was no longer a duel or even a comparison. It had become a conversation, a shared exploration. With each piece, they seemed to be saying, "This is what I've felt. This is what I've learned. This is who I am." Victor found himself playing from memory, choosing pieces that had personal meaning rather than impressive technique. Hannah responded in kind, sometimes with classical works, sometimes with her own compositions. Their musical dialogue became so intimate that the audience almost felt like witnesses to something private. For the final exchange, Hannah played a piece Victor had never heard before. It began with a single repeated note, like a heartbeat, then gradually expanded into a melody of such hope and gentle joy that it seemed to fill the hall with light. When she finished, she nodded to Victor, inviting his response. Victor sat still for a moment, overwhelmed by what he had experienced throughout the evening. Then he began to improvise, something he had never done in public before. He started with Hannah's heartbeat motif, acknowledging her piece, then gradually wove in elements from all the music they had shared that evening. It wasn't planned or perfect, but it was honest, his way of saying thank you, of honoring what she had taught him. As he played the final notes, Victor felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the pure joy of making music without concern for judgment or acclaim. For those few minutes, he hadn't been Victor Chen, renowned pianist. He had simply been a human being connecting with others through sound. The applause that followed was thunderous. The audience rose to their feet, calling out and clapping with genuine emotion. But what moved Victor most was the look on Hannah's face as she stood and bowed beside him, a look of peaceful satisfaction, as if something important had been accomplished. The director of the music education program came on stage with bouquets for both of them. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said when the applause finally quieted, "I think we can all agree we've witnessed something extraordinary tonight. Two brilliant musicians showing us not just the power of technical mastery, but the true purpose of music, to connect us to our humanity." More applause followed. Victor and Hannah took several bows together, hands clasped between them. As they were leaving the stage, a small girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, darted forward from the wings and handed Hannah a folded paper. Hannah knelt down to thank the child, who whispered something in her ear before running back to a waiting adult. In the privacy of the backstage area, surrounded by well-wishers and organizers, Victor felt strangely detached from the congratulations being offered. His mind was still on the stage, on what had happened during their performance. He made his way to Hannah, who stood slightly apart from the crowd looking at the folded paper in her hands. Victor struggled to find words adequate to describe what he had experienced. Yes, Hannah agreed simply, understanding. What did the little girl give you? He asked. Hannah unfolded the paper and showed him. It was a drawing of two pianos with stick figures sitting at them, surrounded by colorful swirls that presumably represented music. At the bottom, in careful handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for helping me want to play piano again." She's one of my students at the community center, Hannah explained. She lost her father last year and stopped playing afterward. Tonight was the first time she's come to a concert since then. Victor nodded, understanding the significance. Will you continue teaching at the center? Yes, it's where I belong now. Hannah carefully refolded the drawing and tucked it into her purse. And you? What's next for the great Victor Chen? The question caught him off guard. Before tonight, the answer would have been simple. More competitions, more tours, more accolades. But now those goals seemed hollow. I don't know, he admitted. For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan. Hannah smiled. That can be a good place to begin. Thomas approached them, beaming with excitement. Phenomenal! Absolutely phenomenal. The critics are raving already. Victor, we should consider recording an album of tonight's program. Something about musical conversations or dueling pianos. Not dueling, Victor interrupted. There was no duel tonight. Thomas looked confused. But that was the whole concept. The concept changed, Victor said firmly. If we record anything, it should be called conversations or dialogue. And Hannah would need to be an equal partner, not a novelty addition. Hannah looked surprised. You want to work together again? If you'd consider it, Victor said. I think I have a lot more to learn from you. Perhaps we both have things to learn from each other, she replied thoughtfully. Thomas looked between them, clearly trying to adjust to this unexpected turn. Well, whatever you want to call it, people are going to want more. The audience was completely captivated. Let me think about it, Hannah said. Tonight was significant for me. I need some time. Victor understood. Of course. As the crowd began to disperse, Victor and Hannah found themselves walking together toward the exit. Will you go to the memorial service tomorrow? Victor asked gently. Hannah nodded. Every year. Her grandparents will be there, some of her friends from school. They're teenagers now. And people from the community who remember her. Victor hesitated, then said, Would it be inappropriate if I came? Not to intrude, just to pay respects. Hannah stopped walking and looked at him with surprise. You would do that? If it's welcome, yes. She studied his face for a moment. It starts at 11 at the small shrine near Ueno Park. There's a cherry tree we planted for her. Thank you, Victor said. And thank you for tonight. For showing me what I'd forgotten about music. What was that? Hannah asked. Victor thought about how to express the profound shift he'd experienced. That perfection isn't the point. Connection is, he paused. My entire career I've been trying to impress people. Tonight was the first time I tried to reach them instead. Hannah smiled. You did. I could see it on their faces. They reached the stage door where cars were waiting to take them to their respective destinations. Until tomorrow. Then, Hannah said with a small bow. Until tomorrow, Victor replied. As he watched her car pull away, Victor felt both exhausted and strangely energized. The evening had begun as a challenge, a chance to prove his superiority. It had ended with him questioning everything he thought he knew about success. About music, about why he played it all. For the first time in years, Victor Chen wasn't thinking about his next competition or his next triumph. He was thinking about a little girl he had never met, whose mother played piano to keep her memory alive. He was thinking about students at a community center, learning to express their feelings through music. He was thinking about what it meant to play not for acclaim, but as a gift, and for the first time since he was a child, he was looking forward to sitting at a piano with no expectations, just to see what might happen when he let the music speak from his heart instead of his hands. The morning was clear and cool. With a gentle breeze that carried the scent of flowers, Victor stood at the edge of Ueno Park, watching families stroll along the paths and children chasing each other across open spaces. Life continuing in all its ordinary beauty. He checked his watch. 10:30. He was early for the memorial service, deliberately so. He wanted time to gather his thoughts, to prepare himself for the emotional weight of the occasion. Victor had spent a restless night replaying the concert in his mind. Each note, each exchange with Hana, each moment of connection, it felt like something fundamental had shifted inside him. For years he had approached his music like a fortress, impenetrable, impressive, but ultimately designed to keep others at a distance. Last night, for the first time, he had opened a door. He followed the path deeper into the park until he found the small shrine Hana had described. It was a peaceful place, partially secluded by trees. A single cherry tree stood to one side, not yet in bloom, but healthy and strong. Around its base were arranged small stones painted with colorful designs: flowers, animals, stars. Children's artwork, preserved in stone. No one else had arrived yet, so Victor sat on a bench nearby, watching the light play through the branches of the memorial tree. He tried to imagine Aiko, what she had looked like, what her laugh had sounded like, how she had felt about her mother's piano playing. A life cut terribly short, yet still creating ripples years later. The sound of quiet voices drew his attention. A small group was approaching, an older couple who must be Aiko's grandparents, a few adults Victor didn't recognize, and 3 teenage girls walking together. All carried flowers or small mementos. Then he saw Hana walking slightly apart from the others. She wore a simple black dress, different from the one she had worn at the concert. Her hair was loose today, falling softly around her face. She carried a small bouquet of white lilies in what looked like a child's notebook. When she noticed Victor, surprise flickered across her face, followed by a small, grateful smile. She approached him while the others gathered near the shrine. "You came," she said simply. "Of course," Victor replied, standing to greet her properly. "Thank you for allowing me to be here." Hana introduced him to the others as a fellow pianist and new friend. Her parents bowed politely, studying him with curious eyes. The teenagers whispered among themselves, apparently recognizing him. One of them had brought a small cello, which she carefully unpacked. "We play music for her," Hana explained quietly to Victor. "It started the first year when words felt impossible. Now it's become our tradition." The small ceremony began with the placing of flowers and mementos near the tree. Aiko's grandfather spoke briefly about remembering not just the sorrow of loss, but the joy of having known her. One of the teenagers, who Victor learned had been Aiko's best friend in kindergarten, read a poem she had written. Then it was time for the music. The teenage cellist played first, a simple, heartfelt rendition of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" that she explained had been Aiko's favorite song to dance to. The choice of a children's tune, played with complete sincerity, brought tears to several eyes. Hana sat on a small portable piano bench that someone had brought, opened the notebook she had carried, and began to play. Victor realized it was a simpler version of the piece she had performed last night. Small Shoes. Watching her fingers move gently across imaginary keys, creating music that existed only in the minds of those who had heard it before, was perhaps the most poignant performance Victor had ever witnessed. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Aiko's grandmother spoke. "Would you like to play something too?" she asked Victor, her English heavily accented but clear. Victor hadn't expected to be invited to participate. He looked at Hana, who nodded encouragingly. "I would be honored," he said. "But I don't have a piano." "Like Hana," the grandmother said, gesturing to the bench. Understanding, Victor sat where Hana had been. He closed his eyes, trying to center himself. What could he possibly offer this family, these friends who had loved this child? Then he knew. He began to move his hands in the familiar patterns of Bach's Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, not a sad piece, but one full of gentle hope and reassurance. Like Hana, he played in silence, the music existing only in memory and imagination. Yet somehow in that quiet grove with the breeze rustling through the cherry tree, it felt more real than any concert he had ever given. When he finished, he looked up to find Hana watching him with an expression of deep understanding. The ceremony concluded with the placing of a new painted stone at the base of the tree. This one, from one of Hana's students at the community center, a swirl of bright colors forming a butterfly in flight. As the small group began to disperse, Hana's parents approached Victor. "Thank you for coming," Aiko's grandfather said formally. "It means much to Hana to have support." "Your playing was very beautiful," the grandmother added. "Even without the piano, I could hear it." Victor thanked them, feeling humbled by their graciousness in the face of such profound loss. They soon left with the others, leaving only Hana and Victor in the peaceful grove. "That was the most meaningful performance I've ever given," Victor said after a while. "And no one actually heard it." "I heard it," Hana said. "Not with my ears, but I heard it." They sat together on the bench, watching the light and shadows move across the shrine. "How do you do it?" Victor asked. "Continue living, playing, teaching after such a loss?" Hana was quiet for so long that Victor thought she might not answer. Then she said, "At first I couldn't. I stopped playing completely. For almost a year I couldn't bear to touch the piano. It reminded me of all the moments I'd missed with her because I was pursuing my career." Victor nodded, understanding the weight of her words, but then one day, "I was walking past a school and heard children singing. Heiko used to sing that same song." Hana smiled at the memory. "I realized that avoiding music wasn't honoring her life. It was only emphasizing her death. She loved when I played. So I started again, but differently, not for audiences or critics or my own ego. I played for her, and somehow, that led me to playing for others who needed the comfort music can bring." "The community center," Victor said. "Yes. Children who have experienced loss or trauma, music gives them a voice when words fail." She looked at him directly. "We all need that sometimes." Victor thought about his own relationship with music, how it had begun as joy, transformed into ambition, and ultimately become a wall between himself and others. Until last night. "I've been thinking about your suggestion," Hana said. "About recording together?" "And?" Victor asked. "I think it could be good. Not just for us, but for the listeners. But I have a different proposal." "I'm listening." "Instead of just recording concert pieces, what if we created something specifically for people who are grieving? Music that acknowledges pain but also offers hope." She hesitated. "We could donate the proceeds to children's bereavement programs." The idea resonated deeply with Victor. "I would be honored to be part of that. But I have so much to learn about playing from the heart, not just the hands." "We all have something to learn from each other," Hana said. "That's what makes music a conversation, not a monologue." They left the shrine together, walking slowly back through the park. As they passed a small pond, Victor noticed a piano in a nearby pavilion. One of the public pianos the city had installed to encourage community music making. "Would you like to play something?" "Together this time?" he asked, nodding toward it. Hana followed his gaze and smiled. "Yes, I would." The piano was old and slightly out of tune, nothing like the magnificent instruments they had played the night before. But as they sat side by side on the worn bench, it felt exactly right. Victor began with a simple melody from Mozart. Hana joined in, adding harmonies and counter-melodies that complemented his playing perfectly. They moved from piece to piece without discussion, each responding to the other's musical ideas, building on them, transforming them. A small crowd gathered to listen, park visitors, children with their parents, an elderly couple who sat on a nearby bench holding hands. No one knew they were watching two of the finest pianists in the world. They simply knew they were hearing something beautiful. As they played, Victor looked at the faces in their impromptu audience. The smiles, the closed eyes, the expressions of peaceful enjoyment. This, he realized, was what music was for. Not to impress or intimidate, but to create moments of shared humanity. When they finally stopped playing, the small crowd applauded warmly. A little boy approached and asked shyly if he could try the piano too. Hana immediately stood and offered him her place, showing him how to position his small fingers on the keys. Watching her gentle encouragement as the child picked out a simple tune, Victor felt a certainty settle over him. His life would not be the same after this trip to Japan. He had come seeking a challenge to his supremacy, and found instead a challenge to his entire understanding of what it meant to be a musician. As the afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled light across the pavilion, Victor Chen, the pianist once known as the Machine, made a silent promise to himself. From this day forward, he would play not to prove his worth but to share it, not to stand apart but to connect. not for acclaim, but for the simple, profound joy of speaking heart to heart through music. And somehow, in that moment, he felt certain that somewhere, a little girl named Aiko was smiling.